Welcome back to Next Gen Console Watch, our show following all the news and updates on the PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X, and Next Gen games. I'm your host, Damon Hatfield, and as always, I'm joined by Ryan McCaffrey, host of IGN's Xbox podcast, Podcast Unlocked.
Howdy, Daemon.
Hello there. And Max Scoville, host of IGN's PlayStation podcast, Podcast Beyond.
Hey.
And this week, we're also joined by IGN publisher John Davison. John, welcome back to the show.
Hi, how you doing?
And there's so much to talk about this week. Last week we were talking about Star Wars Jedi Survivor. We were heaping praise upon it. But we recorded the show before the game was actually out in the wild. Still a very good game. We're all just talking before we were filming here that how much we're enjoying it. However, it launched into very, very rough shape on PC. And that is unfortunately becoming a narrative in this year, 2023. I believe it's 6 big AAA games that have launched onto PC in a barely working state this year, just this year so far. And that includes the Last of Us PC port. Some of the games, Hogwarts Legacy also had a lot of trouble at launch. It just seems to be like this is happening more and more often, and I don't understand why it is. Even Redfall, which is out now, this issue is not exclusive to just PC. Jedi Survivor also has plenty of problems on PS5 where I'm playing it. It's crashed 4 or 5 times, which is very unusual for a console game to do. And Redfall, an Xbox first-party exclusive, launched into very rough shape even on Xbox Series X. So, John, why don't you kick things off? It's not unheard of for games to launch in a buggy, rough state. It just seems like this is happening more and more often today.
I disagree. Okay. So the old guy is here, so I'm going to tell old man stories about the olden days. This has been the same problem for 30 years. Like it's no worse than it's ever been. Like there was a couple of I was sort of like reading up and reminding myself of games that I had reviewed years ago. Wing Commander 3 came out in 1994. So I think there's 2 problems we're talking about here. One is whether the ambition of the game developers is a little ahead of what the hardware can do, which has been a pretty constant problem throughout all game development. And then the other one is stuff that's just broken. So 30 years ago, and 2 examples of that was Wing Commander 3. It had some crazy high tech specs, but it was like, I mean, it needed a 486 DX33, which is a processor running at 33 megahertz. That's how much slower. I don't think there's a device in your house that's that slow anymore. And the game just would not work on the highest spec. It wasn't until a year later when the Pentium 100 shipped that the game would even run reasonably well. And then that same year, Peter Molyneux, always a very ambitious game developer, put out Magic Carpet, which a lot of people may not be familiar with, but it was a 3D game where you were on a magic carpet and you could morph the terrain by casting spells at it. That game, you couldn't beat it at all when it shipped because level 50 just didn't work properly. And there were 5 levels in the game missing, and there was no way to patch it. The only way that game ended up being fixed was when they did another pressing of the game. They shipped different code on a physical disk. So even going back that far, like there's other stories. Space Station Silicon Valley had you can't 100% it in the original version of the game, which most people own because there was something missing from the code. Like games have shipped broken since the dawn of video games. Where we have it better now, and this is like a pretty contrarian point compared to what we're seeing people complain about on Twitter and Reddit and stuff, is now they can fix it. Back then, it was like, that was it. Once it was out, you were stuck with it.
Yes, but it seems to me like those were more isolated incidents back in the day, whereas, in a span of just months, it's just release after release after release.
I don't think they were isolated. It was, I would say, every version of Wing Commander probably shipped broken. I mean, that was Origin Systems, which is now part of EA. They had a lot of very ambitious games. They all shipped broken. They all shipped like they didn't work properly on the hardware. It was way too ambitious. And then you go through time, and you got like games like Crysis, which came along, which was way more ambitious than the hardware was capable of doing, and is still cited as an example of that to this day. Of like, can it run Crysis is still a meme, right? And I think every time there's something that people really want, they think that it's like, oh my God, this thing that I love and it doesn't work properly. But it's been that way forever. I'm not saying that's excusable, but it's not like a recent phenomenon. This is like 30 plus years of game releases have suffered this same way.
How long did it take people to figure out that those games were that broken? Because I wonder how much of this is a byproduct of just how much communication there is. Because
It was like if the magazines would review it, and if they caught the problem, it would be in the review. Like, this game is so broken, you can't finish it. Like, I mean, going back even further, there was a Terminator 2 game on the Commodore 64, which they had to get out in time for the movie release. And they didn't finish all the levels, so they just made the level that they did finish so hard you couldn't beat it. I mean, like, these are the kinds of things that would happen back then, and the only way, and it wasn't until bulletin boards and stuff started becoming a thing that people were chatting, but like, there wasn't this groupthink which turned into group rage. That didn't exist.
Well, now it's like, I mean, before you'd have to pick up a magazine, now it's like everyone has a phone in their pocket, and day one, thousands, millions of videos pop up of people talking about this new game, this hotly anticipated thing. People go live on Twitch. It gets spread all over social media. So I imagine some of that is communication, but again, it's also more variables, you know?
Like, and you'd go into EB or Babbage's or whatever, or your local game store, and the guy behind the counter would be like, "Hey, have you heard Redfall's completely broken?" That would be how you heard about it.
Ryan,
the town square of York.
Ryan, you've also been around the block a few times covering the games industry. What's your take? Is it not that new a phenomenon for this many games to be shipping broken?
I don't think it's quite as universal necessarily as John's saying, because, I don't remember in my NES era moving forward, like that console childhood, I don't remember it being quite a thing. Not that there weren't bugs and glitches you'd find. Granted, there were products like the Game Genie that would literally physically exploit the game via the cartridge. But yeah, I mean, PC's always kind of been the tip of the spear technologically.
Because there are so many variables, right? Like,
right.
My PC is almost certainly not exactly the same as yours.
Right, of course. I mean, it's nearly impossible, really. But I'm saying even 30 years ago, as far as ambition, PC was at the tip of that spear, and consoles, by their walled garden nature, couldn't be. And that's even still true now, right? They are effectively older gen PCs.
Yeah.
That's what the consoles still are to this day. They're still pretty powerful, but yeah, there's that, the closed system, the closed loop, and it definitely, if it's always been there, social media is amplifying it, but it's still getting worse. I think it's just, again, you called out, I think rightly, the ambition of the game.
I think that's the root of it, right?
That's
it's
really
like,
it.
like Jedi's a great example.
Which is a good, ambition is a good thing.
Absolutely. But Jedi is probably a little bit more game than the Series X and PS5 can quite or at least it's not optimized right, or it's very ambitious in terms of what it's trying to do. Mm-hmm. And I think this has been the nature of games, in that, like, fantastic art with incredible effects, and like the developers want to push everything that the thing is theoretically capable of doing, and when you lump it all in together, the hardware struggles a little bit.
But when it works, it's magic, right?
Yeah,
like, you look at Uncharted 2, you look at Gears of War, you look at, the original Halo, on the day one title on the original Xbox, and then Halo 2 really upped the bar on that. There's two sides of it, right? It's like it can overreach maybe, but it can also, just get it just right, it's sublime.
So there's one, I agree with you there. It's wonderful when everything works, but there's a key difference between those games, is that when they came out on a disc, they came out on a disc. That's the only place they came out. Whereas now, it's kind of this weird reverse where you buy a disc in a store and you pop it in and it says, okay, I got to download the game. It's not even build.
The PS5 download of when you put the disc in for Jedi, it's a 150 gig download, right?
Yeah, I think it was it Modern Warfare 2 last year, recently? There was some
Also
huge game
large.
that it wasn't even the size of it. It was the fact that, like, it wasn't on the disc.
There was nothing there.
The disc was a verification method. It wasn't the actual software. There wasn't anything on there. That's this sort of bizarre thing where I think there's, the people who are getting stuff digitally is becoming the overwhelming majority. And if you can download a game digitally, then you can get a patch digitally. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty huge difference from buying a physically pressed game and there's no way to update it. Short of pressing new versions of the game and putting them back in boxes. And I think that there's like a level of flexibility there that developers and publishers have come to expect, where Yeah, it's the weird sort of inverse of games as a service is that they're also, there's always room for improvement. There's always going to be a day one patch. There's always going to be tweaks and stuff. And it's, you hear about stuff that's, meeting cert. That means that it will not cause your PlayStation 5 to explode and kill your entire family. That's not really a high bar for how well it's going to run on something. But I feel like that's a pretty far cry from the Nintendo seal of approval. Which again, there were bad games that came out with that on it, but at the same time, it was stuff that theoretically worked. And nowadays, I don't know, we get stuff that kind of doesn't work, but we get like an IOU. I mean, on Redfall physical boxes, they had to cover up the 60 FPS thing because it wasn't there day one, which is...
Because there are actually two problems happening here, right? There's buggy and broken, and then there's not running well. And in the cases of some games, it's both. Mm-hmm. So I think Redfall is probably a pretty good example, isn't it? It doesn't feel finished. It's got a bunch of problems. It's got a bunch of bugs, and it won't run at the high frame rate that was promised. And when you look at the art in the game, I think when you look at Jedi, like, here is a really impressive game that is like really pushing the engine that they're using to the max and pushing the hardware to the max. When I look at Redfall, and when I saw trailers of that thing, at no point did I ever think, here's a game that's really pushing the limits of this hardware. And it's just not, right? So I think there are different expectations. And at the same time, I think we're seeing tech demos like the Unreal demos coming, which are setting the bar for our expectations of what awesome looks like now. But they're not real games. And I think, so they're a little artificial. Like the Rivian and the Jungle demo was beautiful, but it wasn't a real game.
And then you've got the rising, $70 games only increases justifiably a player's expectation that they're going to get a polished game for their money. Yeah. And so I think that, that divide too is between, what you're getting and what you're paying for and what you're actually getting is only exacerbating the situation as well.
Yeah, Ryan, Redfall is Xbox's first $70 game. Let's talk about that for a moment. By the time this episode is out, IGN's final review for Redfall will be up. Spoilers, it's not going to be positive. Just some of the technical problems our reviewer found: the textures taking an absolute age to pop in or not loading at all, disappearing characters and animations, other mission-breaking bugs. Ryan, what do you think happened here? Owned by Microsoft, who presumably has all the money in the world to make the most polished games possible.
Well, I want to plug Podcast Unlocked real quick, as I sometimes do on this show, because we had an hour and 17-minute discussion about this, and I thought we had a really, really fantastic, far-reaching conversation about it. But it's tough to know without having, either a Pete Hines here or a Phil Spencer here, somebody at the leadership level, Matt Booty maybe, to give us like the real answer, because it's to us as gamers, as customers, we look at this again as the Redfall is the first big AAA game from Xbox in way too long. Again, no disrespect to Hi-Fi Rush, to Pentiment. Those are 9 and 10 out of 10 scoring games on IGN respectively, but those are smaller games. There are different expectations for those and different impacts that those have compared to these blockbuster games, which Redfall was every bit pitched as. This is Arcane. This is our first $70 game. You've been waiting a while for a big blockbuster. Here we go. And it comes out in the way it does. I just don't understand how this game was not delayed like an additional quarter. Mm-hmm. And again, I know it's more complicated than that. It's not a simple answer, but again, it's answers I don't have. But as somebody who is playing this stuff, who is covering this stuff, and you look, Microsoft, they have not been shy about investing in those teams to give those games more time. Psychonauts 2 was an incredible idea that was on a shoestring budget, crowdfunded before Microsoft came along. They invest their resources, they take a bunch of extra time, and we got the full potential Game of the Year nominee. We got exactly what Psychonauts 2 could have been, and we got all of it, and that was so great. Halo Infinite was supposed to be a day one launch title for their next-gen console. There's nothing more, like, the bar doesn't get higher than that, and Microsoft had the balls to say, this isn't ready. We're going to push this out 13 months. So they are not afraid to delay. And so, and in fact, Redfall itself was originally, when it was unveiled, the initial teaser trailer said in summer 2021, said it was coming out in summer of 2022. And then as that time approached with no release date in sight, eventually we learned, okay, it's going to be 2023, and we eventually come to learn May 2nd. So as May 2nd's approaching, this 30 frames per second, which, whether or not you think that's bad, it's bad. It's a bad look for them. At the very, very least, whether, regardless of what you think of the actual frame rate on the console version of the game. And so, how do you not move? If you move it out 3 months, that puts you in early August, that you're still well in front of Starfield, which is your biggest game, if you're Microsoft, of 2023. You're well in front of Starfield. You're well in front of Forza Motorsport, that next-gen reboot, which I expect in either October or November at this point, since it probably won't be September, since that's Starfield, and I doubt it's going to be before then. And you're also out ahead of the Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2.5 that we're going to be getting this fall, and the inevitable wave of other, Assassin's Creed Mirage, probably, all those other big third-party games. So, if they move out 3 months, maybe it's not enough time to address some of the underlying legitimate gameplay concerns about Redfall, but you could sure clean up the frame rate, the bugs, the texture issues, these again, I know it's not fair, I'm not a game developer, but you almost want to say unforced errors of Redfall. So that's the part I just can't square, how this wasn't
problems
pushed
are
out.
not subtle, right? Like, I can't imagine if they saw Halo Infinite at the state that it was in pre-hardware launch, and they were like, it's not good enough, we're going to move it. I mean, Redfall, you look at it, I can't imagine it being are we ready to go on this game?
Right.
And everyone going, yeah, sure, looks awesome.
And so that's where, on Unlocked, we talked a little bit, again, in more detail, but did they kind of know that this game wasn't coming together a long time ago and said, what, let's just get it out there. Our fans have been waiting for anything. Let's get it out. And then the sooner we can have what is a very talented Arcane Austin team. Their track record shows they have a ton of talent. We can just start clean slate, get them going on something new. And so I don't know. There are definitely, it's not a black and white situation, but I wish I knew the real answer.
I just feel like maybe a game that is called Redfall and is set in a scenic, picturesque, autumnal New England town and is about going door to door fighting vampires. I feel like maybe that could have found a good audience in October.
But then you're
release. Like, maybe just save it for Halloween.
But Max, in their defense though, the track record of new IPs in Q4 it's a little rough. You have to have a massive marketing budget to compete with a new IP, because then you're up against Spider-Man. You're up against Call of Duty.
Spider-Man beats vampires.
You're
Morbius. You can check it out in the comics.
October is a tough window for any game, even if it thematically really makes a lot of sense.
I'm half kidding, but at the same time, I can't help but wonder if maybe is this just trying to get out of the way of Starfield? Is this just kind of clearing the air? Is this just putting it out there? Fix it in post? It's going to get patches. It's going to get updates. Maybe at some point it'll be wonderful and playable and great. And by the time the holiday buy a Series X sizzle reel rolls around and they're hyping up Black Friday sales, Redfall is in a good playable state and it convinces people to pick up an Xbox. But I don't know. It's sort of
and you could maybe tinfoil hat it a little bit and say, if they knew it wasn't tracking super well, that okay, we put it out on May 2nd and in the next 45 days there will be Diablo IV, there will be The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, there will be Street Fighter VI, there will be Final Fantasy 16, and it kind of gets Redfall out of the limelight, gives them a chance to put in the work like you're talking about, to then maybe kind of put it back out on, maybe promote it on Game Pass a little bit more in the fall when it's hopefully in a better spot. maybe.
We've seen plenty of games have like big, huge, heavily publicized, absolute wrecks of launches, and then turn themselves around.
Absolutely.
There's a bunch, right? I mean, Final Fantasy XIV is probably the biggest, right? It took them 2 years to fix it.
No Man's Sky.
No Man's Sky. It took them a long time, and now people think it's one of the greatest things ever. And it's now delivering on the
initial.
There's that ambition again, right?
Yep.
Which what else have we got? Even Master Chief. You brought up Halo. Master Chief Collection, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It took far longer than it should have, but they got it there. Now it's every bit the seamless multiplayer, cross-pollinating Halo collection that we wanted.
Yeah, I mean, the big one I look to is Cyberpunk, which obviously had such a, I don't recall any other game getting delisted, especially one of that scale, of that level of hype for it, and people were so excited for it. So many people pre-ordered it, and then it was flat out just not working on certain systems, just wasn't.
Yeah, the old gen consoles.
Yeah, and that's what it was announced for. That was what it was sold for. And then fast forward, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years, whatever, and it's great. It's wonderful. They put out the next gen patch. Yeah,
they did the work.
Yeah,
and they have earned the community's support again.
Yeah, so I think the audience grievance is, why do you have to do that work in front of me? And why am I participating in the tech? So I think that's the culture that has emerged, right? In that it's get the game out, put it in people's hands, and then respond to the audience's feelings about it. What do you guys think about that as just the way that games is probably the only medium where that happens, right? There's no other any kind of medium that is a work in progress in public,
other than deleting a Starbucks cup from Game of Thrones after the fact. We don't really see that in TV or film.
Yeah. But do you guys think it's acceptable? I mean, it's sort of it's just become, since things could be patched, it's become the norm. I wish we
should
it
some
be
kind of open beta, like we've got with the Steam early access type thing. Xbox has played with that. But the kind of cool thing there is you get to feel like, you pay maybe $30 instead of $50 or whatever.
Right. You get a deal on it by
you're
opting into the unfinished version that you can technically sort of contribute meaningful feedback to.
Kind of how it should be. I don't know. It's also a weird thing to gripe about when it's like you get it's like $70 for this game that's busted out the gate, but then there's a wealth of shockingly good free-to-play games out there at the same time, which are just.
Well, and
it's a weird time to be playing games because it's sort of, where do you put your money,
Speaking as the Xbox guy here, I think Game Pass is sort of that's a double-edged sword in this, where to exactly what you guys are talking about, Game Pass can kind of it doesn't technically, if you're an active subscriber and you find value in Game Pass as a service, then Redfall doesn't necessarily, its problems at launch don't necessarily affect you, because you can just play other games in the Game Pass catalog and come back to Redfall. Like you said, Max, come Halloween time, I'm in a vampire spooky game mood. I'm gonna check back in on Redfall, 4 months later or 5 months later and see where it is. But at the same point, do we want to accept that as something we're okay with?
Well, that's saying that Game Pass is a crutch then, right? Where it's it's good to know I'm paying for everything else as well, so it's fine that it's not right. I don't think that's certainly not what was presented as the vision.
Right,
of
it's
Game
not the
Pass,
spirit
right?
of it. I'm not defending it at all. I'm just saying that could be a way that even Microsoft might look at it that way. Of we'll just get this thing out. And we can always push it on Game Pass later.
Right.
So as we look ahead to the next round of big AAA games that are coming, what do we think are the odds that they're going to launch, in a stable, playable state? Diablo IV is a big one. I don't know if everyone remembers Diablo 3 was a big mess at launch. The servers couldn't handle everything. But Ryan, they've had these beta tests for Diablo 4, right? Presumably that's the whole point of those is to try and avoid the same mistakes.
Yeah, and I give Blizzard a ton of credit where the open beta weekends, we're now about to have the third one, the server slam as they're calling it, and I applaud them for doing this because, again, yes, Diablo 3 was specifically a disaster scenario for Blizzard and more importantly for players who had been waiting of years and years. I'm such a big Diablo fan. Diablo 3 came out how many years, John, after Diablo 2?
Oh my God,
lot.
yeah.
A lot of years. And then you can't even get into the game. And so, Diablo 4 doing a first beta weekend, a second beta weekend, and then a server slam, and they've also published a blog on here are the actual long list of gameplay changes we've made as a result of your feedback. So it's not just a technical server beta. They've actually used it to make the game better. Is Diablo 4 going to be completely seamless and smooth at launch? Probably not, because it's still going to be millions of people just slamming that game on June 6th. But maybe the server slam, I guess Diablo 4 probably has, in the modern context, as an online only, always online game, Diablo 4 probably has the absolute best chance of having a smooth launch, or as smooth a launch as you can have, because of the work that they've done here in March and now again in May with these beta weekends. So yeah, I give them a ton of credit, and I'm really eager to see. Because I hope it goes well, not only as a gamer looking to dive into Diablo 4, but then it'll show other developers hey, if we carve out the time in our schedule and in our budget to do this, it's gonna make for a better player experience on launch day, which is all any of us want.
Mm-hmm.
John, I believe you're excited for Diablo 4. You feel pretty confident in it?
Yeah, and I think as Ryan said, I think it's more about the servers than it is about. Because I think some of the other games that we've been talking about, it's the ambition of the graphics and what the engine is doing and how much it's making the hardware do. I think Diablo, it's beautiful, but it's not all bells and whistles, really pushing the hardware to its limits. It's going to be whether
4K 60 on Xbox Series X.
Yeah,
which is exactly what I want.
It runs beautiful. It's going to be, do the world events all trigger at the right time? And if we're choosing to do something together, does it handle everything correctly? And is it doing the relative scaling correctly? And I think, the fact that they're putting that attention into that, I think, is a really good signal for the future. I think, there are probably some other games coming this year that I'm more concerned about. Now...
Such as?
Starfield?
That's what I wanted to bring up. That's kind of the elephant in the room at this point. In the wake of Redfall's disastrous launch, I think we can call it a disaster. Starfield could not be a more important release for Xbox now. Everything is riding on Starfield. Ryan, agree?
Completely agree. Yeah, this came up on Unlock this week. Yeah, is it fair to Todd Howard and the Bethesda Game Studios team that basically any and all remaining hope that Xbox is able to deliver a polished at launch, awesome blockbuster AAA game to its customers? Is it fair that weight is now entirely being shouldered by Starfield? No, but that is where we are. Yeah. That is where we are. Starfield has all the pressure. And it can't even be an 8 out of 10, which is great on the IGN scale, just to remind everybody. I would even argue 9 out of 10 will still be a little bit, it's got to be Khalif Adams, who from Spawn on Me, who kindly sat in with us on Podcast Unlocked this week, put it really well if you do watch Unlocked or listen to it. And he said it's got to define what the platform can do. And not just from a technological perspective, but from a gameplay perspective, And if I do think the potential is very much there for Starfield to do that, because Starfield, if it does everything that we've seen glimpses of, it will be the best of No Man's Sky, meaning the modern, awesome version that everybody loves. The best of No Man's Sky and the best of a Skyrim, a Fallout 4. Marrying those two things is not something we've seen anybody successfully do so far. So
luckily, all the games you just mentioned have launched in a bug-free fashion.
Well, Todd Howard had publicly put his flag in the ground 18 months early, saying 11/11/22. And he said that in 2021, in summer of 2021. And so my hope is that the extra 10 months that Starfield is currently nearing the halfway point or more in now, that is entirely polished, and that the game itself could have actually come out on 11/11/22, but that they are just polishing the hell out of it. So that, of course, remains to be seen. We've got the Starfield Direct on June 11th on IGN immediately after the Xbox showcase. Will it look more polished than the framey version we saw at last year's Xbox showcase? You sure hope so. That'll be the check-in on Starfield.
I mean, you mentioned Psychonauts 2 and how it was like, this is what happens when a studio that was running on Kickstarter money is suddenly running on Microsoft money.
Yeah.
And I love Bethesda games. They're always shockingly, wonderfully ambitious, but they all, there's the running joke that like they let their community finish the games for them with mods. It's always, Skyrim was eventually finished thanks to the fan base. Great work, guys. But like, I hope that Starfield that's not the case, and it really
I agree.
should be, because this is, one of the biggest corporations on earth scooping up this studio.
That's
and being
right.
like, okay, you got a year and a half extra to finish this thing. And if it comes out the gate and it's just, again, the best and the worst of No Man's Sky and Skyrim, Skyrim in space, whatever you want to call it, I think that's going to really just be kind of a black mark on the Xbox.
You're absolutely right. I mean, the $70 price point, the Microsoft money. Yeah, this is not like Bethesda as that sort of scrappy little publisher that makes cool games that people like. Like, you're right. They are now backed by $1 trillion corporation who's given them a ton of extra time. This is the first release from this development team since 2015. This game, Starfield's been in development for a long, long time. Fallout 4 was the last thing that BGS was the lead developer on. So yeah, Max, you're absolutely right. Like, I think that plus, what's happened with Redfall and this the patience is all gone from loyal Xbox fans. And I won't speak for everyone, but I think a lot of people, their patience is exhausted, and their confidence in Xbox to deliver a polished 10 out of 10 level blockbuster game is shaken. That confidence is shaken. So I don't think Starfield can launch in the same shape that Skyrim did or Fallout 4 did, which again were great games that just had the kind of, it's like almost an accepted joke, like the Bethesda jank. Yep. Like that's not acceptable anymore. So we'll see if Starfield can ship without it.
We will see indeed. We'll be watching the upcoming release of Starfield with great interest. To everyone out there that's having a rough time with Star Wars Jedi Survivor or Redfall or another big AAA game, sorry, I know that's very frustrating when you've been looking forward to playing a new game and then it is having all sorts of troubles at launch. So Godspeed that those patch and fixes are available to download as soon as possible. I have the results of the poll from last episode. We wanted to know, what upcoming Star Wars game are you most excited for? And perhaps surprisingly, the winner was the one that we know is in quite a bit of trouble. Or just under half the votes went to Knights of the Old Republic, the remake, which we know the development was they brought in a second developer to help Aspire, Saber, and apparently development was stalled and indefinitely. Don't know what the sort of predicament for that game is right now. John, do you have any sort of like spidey sense? Should half of respondents be excited for the Knights of the Old Republic remake?
I get why everyone voted for it, right? Because I think there's definitely some fatigue from Star Wars fans around the sort of the timeline that has been explored kind of with all the Star Wars media. And what people love about Knights of the Old Republic is it's so far removed. And I think it is definitely the cooler of the old Star Wars generation. Like, I'd not really paid that much attention to the High Republic stuff, but it pops up in Jedi Survivor, and I don't like it.
I mean, it's only just started popping up in all the hottest young adult novels and stuff.
No, but what I like about it is it feels to me like Star Wars trying to be Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
And it feels kind of like, I don't know, and like all the gold robes. I just don't, I feel like it is.
Problems. There's no Sith Lords. There's no Empire. What are they?
What are they so stressed about? So I think Knights of the Old Republic, I think there's a lot of Star Wars lore associated with it that's very cool, right? There's the Sith that pop up through that, and the whole Revan stuff. There's a lot there to mine and to reintroduce. And I think there's a lot of people that loved it the first time around that are now sort of introducing it to their kids. But I have teenage kids. I told them this is one of the greatest games ever, and I mean they played it, but their reaction to it at first was, "Oh my God, this looks awful." Because I think there's that sort of bar of like what is an acceptable kind of look for a game. I think it's so old that it doesn't quite hit that bar. So I completely get it. But I think who's involved in it? Is Saber involved in it now, right?
Saber and Aspire, yeah.
Yeah.
They've never taken on, this might arguably be the highest sort of bar they've aimed for.
Yeah.
Not that they haven't done good stuff.
But they're backed by a company with a lot of money.
I think they should have remade a really bad game and surprised people rather than remade a really good game and potentially let them down. Super Bombad Racing HD.
Also, KOTOR's my favorite role-playing game ever. I reviewed it for Official Xbox Magazine, and I'm now realizing, I believe, this July is the 20th anniversary of KOTOR, because it was 2003. Wow. So that is terrifying. How long that's been. It is, and it certainly doesn't look great, but it is.
The bones are amazing, right?
I mean, you're a Knight of the Old Republic, you know what I'm talking about.
I am at this point. I'm just happy to be a Knight of the Living Republic. I'm happy for that. Living and employed.
All right, here's a poll for you to vote on for next episode. Is 30 frames per second acceptable in games today? Yes, no, can't tell the difference. Make sure you vote at IGN.com, and we'll share the results with you next episode. And that's going to do it for this supersized edition of Next Gen Console Watch. Thank you to Max, John, and Ryan. Thank you to everyone working behind the scenes in our LA and San Francisco studios to make this all possible. My name is Damon. We'll be back next week with more PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X, and Next Gen game news. We'll see you then.